So what did you miss at Jubilee today? Well, first I apologize for posting this so late. There was things going on, and so this is hours late. So what did you miss at Jubilee? You missed Jonah. We spent pretty much the whole service playing with the story of Jonah. Because most of us know Jonah and the whale, and most of us roll our eyes and think how silly it is to imagine somebody being swallowed up by a whale for 3 days and then spat out. And sometimes we miss hearing the whole story because, well, that Pinocchio bit, swallowed by a whale. But we listened to the story and we wondered about what it's like when God asks you to do something that you don't want to do. When your gifts and your talents are needed, but you don't feel like contributing or don't really know that you can make a difference. And so we run away. We go in the opposite direction. We imagine for a moment that we can escape in this situation an all-knowing, all-seeing, all-loving God. Sure, we'll get on the water. God will never think to look for us there. So indeed, we listened to that story and we wondered about what that means to us. We also recognize that one of the reasons Jonah doesn't want to do what God asks of him is that he can't stand the Ninevites. And what's that like? We wondered about that. When we actually can help people, but we don't like them. When we have a way of saving them from torment, or in this situation, death, but the truth is, deep down inside, I kind of wish they'd die. We wondered about that. We wondered what kind of man it is who gets swallowed up by a fish and somehow manages to give a prayer of thanksgiving. Thank goodness I'm inside this fish. And we followed the story through to hear about Jonah being vomited up on the shore, and lo and behold, there he is at Nineveh, and he still doesn't want to do it. But he does, and he's good. He goes into town. Incidentally, Nineveh, as described, was such a city that it took a grown man could walk 3 days from one side to the other. So you have to imagine a city that stretches from, say, Waterloo to Bowmanville. And then unless it's a straight line, it would probably go from Lake Ontario up to Parry Sound. That's a really big city. One might even wonder if indeed it is a city. Might it be a metaphor for things that are so big we can't imagine? Could Nineveh be called climate change? Racism? Truth and reconciliation? Things that we deny because they're just too big? Things that we run away from because we don't think we can make a difference? I don't know. Or we just don't want to help some people because we don't like them. That was Jonah's situation. But he went, and indeed he warned them, and their hearts were changed. They repented. They turned around. They sat in sackcloth and ash. In fact, the king was so moved that not only did all of the people fast, but the animals, the livestock, the doggies, the kittens, everybody fasted and wore sackcloth and sat in ashes. Little tiny kittens, lambs, in sackcloth, sitting in ashes. And you think that the whale is the only silly part of the story. So now we have a story in which God changes God's mind. God was going to destroy them for their wickedness, and yet they repented, and God changed God's mind. That's actually quite deep to imagine an all-knowing, all-powerful God who changes God's mind. There's some theology in that. There's some thinking in that. And maybe we wouldn't confront it except that it's in a story that makes us laugh. It's funny, God changes in this, but Jonah actually doesn't, because Jonah is still angry. He's upset that he's managed to save these people. And so he sulks. He sits outside of the city and he sulks, and a tree grows up to provide shade while he's sulking. And then A worm comes and eats at the root, and this tree dies, and he mourns the death of the tree. He's so sad. He didn't have a problem with Ninevites and their kittens and puppies all being wiped out for being wicked. But this tree is his best friend, breaking his heart. And God says to Jonah, so you feel like that for a tree. How do you think I feel for the people that I have created? Do you not think that I would be similarly moved, that I would want better for them, that I would mourn their deaths? And we can imagine in that moment Jonah finally changing. And maybe in the hearing of the story we get to change too, but I think, at least we seem to think, that the story has to be comical, it has to be funny, it has to be silly, because as we're laughing, we let the story in, and we are invited to wonder ourselves. How far will we go for somebody we don't like? What are we willing to do to make things right? How often do we run away from what we know we should be doing, from what God's calling us to do? And how often are we more concerned about our gardens than our neighbors, about trees than people? It's a challenging story, and that's what we played around with today at Jubilee, and we sang, and we committed ourselves. We committed ourselves to moving toward Nineveh and not away. We committed ourselves to opening our hearts, our minds, our imaginations, our hands to our neighbors, whether we like them or not. So you didn't have to be at Jubilee today to be so engaged. Read the story. It's 3 chapters. And wonder what God's asking you to do. And by the way, wonder when you're going to get back to see us, because we miss you. So we hope to see you soon. Until we do, God bless.